Welcome, listeners, to a brand new bonus episode of Oh My Work podcast. And today we have a very special treat because we are going to be speaking to a very, very talented illustrator, artist, drawing person who can do more than stick figures. And so everyone please welcome Shiho Pate to the podcast. Welcome, Shiho.
Hi, that was an awesome intro. Thank you.
Well, I'm already starting off, as soon as I know someone who has any sort of artistic ability, I'm already starting off with a level of awe. Even with a ruler, I can't make a straight line. And then I've seen your work. Oh, everyone follow Shiho on Instagram and you'll see, or Twitter, and you'll see all of her amazing artwork. So yeah, and also I've seen your stuff. So I'm like, wow, she knows what she's doing. Speaking of that, how did you get into illustration? Or is this something that you went to school for? Is this something you always wanted to do? Like, how did we even get to this point?
I kind of knew that I wanted to make children's books, but my first passion was actually to become a dolphin trainer. So my whole life, I was just trying to be active and do sports. I played tennis for middle school and high school, and then I moved to America during high school. I think I dropped one grade. I was supposed to be a senior, and I dropped one grade because my English wasn't good enough. So then I had to look for college because I was, graduating from high school, and realized that I can't be a dolphin trainer because my English is still not good enough. And to become a biologist or something, I had to have those skills plus, all the science and math knowledge in English, which is kind of impossible. So the backup was to become an illustrator because that was another thing I knew. I always doodled, and I'm always a shy person, so I try to communicate and doodle on the back of the notebooks and hand it to friends and try to interact it with that way, especially when I was in high school in Alabama, and I was the only 5 kids, Asian kids in the school, and I didn't know English, so I tried to draw and then just hand it to people. I know it sounds awkward, and that's how I made friends. So,
wow.
I try to visually communicate, and I thought maybe that's the way, and I always read children's books with my mom growing up, and she was actually making children's books at the local library for fun, and I thought maybe I should try this, so I went to art college for that.
Okay, you wanted to be a dolphin trainer. That is amazing. Wait, but what's that? So what are that you say you always try to be active with tennis? Is that a thing that you have to make sure that you're always physically active to be a dolphin trainer? I'm they always look fit, but is that an actual thing, or that's just something you decided to do?
Yeah, I think this stuck in my mind. I always visited aquariums, and all those dolphin trainers were always fit and always active. So my middle school mind was oh, I have to do some sports to stay active. So that's why I chose that blindly.
Oh,
and
wow.
I also don't want to be just a dolphin trainer. I wanted to train the dolphins so they can interact with kids that have, as a kid therapy kind of thing. So I don't want to be just a dolphin trainer, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes.
So, so I had all those things in mind, but, I don't know why tennis, I guess everybody did that in middle school. So I just went with my friends and, stay active and that kind of stuff, yeah.
Oh, wow. And then you said that your family moved from Alabama, and you moved from Japan, right? So Japan to Alabama. Yeah. How did you land in Alabama? You think maybe you went, California was on the coast, or Washington, Seattle. How did you land in Alabama? Was that just where the job was, or Alabama?
What? I know. It's so crazy. My dad's always traveled everywhere. I actually lived in UK when I was 3 years old for 3 years.
Oh.
And then went back to Japan, and then my dad, continued to travel everywhere, but we didn't move with them. And then when Alabama opportunity came up, the whole family for some reason was yeah, let's go.
Wow.
And of course, I didn't know much about America, so I was oh, Alabama must be California, all those Hollywood actors are everywhere. And I get there and I see cotton fields, and I'm where am I? But I loved it. I honestly appreciated kind of being an outsider and being out of the comfort zone again, because I was that way when I lived in UK, and I kind of got to relive it, and it was hard, but I learned a lot, and then that got me to going to art college in America, which was not my plan at all. So, I appreciate being here.
Wow. I would never have pieced together a story like that. Wow. So you went to art college with the intention of becoming an illustrator, not just I'll study art and then just see where it takes me.
Yeah, so children's book illustration was my passion, but I thought it was a realistic goal.
Okay.
When I saw the fine arts department, like there was so much competition, but also when I really talked to the, career advisors, it was harder for me to imagine a real career. And also for international students, you have to have a visa after you get out of the college. And to get the visa, you have to have a full-time job somehow. Otherwise, you get kicked out after a year.
You're
So
right.
I had to be realistic even going into art college and, of course, convince my parents that this can be a career. So that's why I majored in illustration. I was studying editorial illustration for a while, advertising, and then I think I took a few classes with how to make children's book at the end. But yeah, it's funny because I had the full-time job mind after college. I actually didn't get to start my children's book illustration career until way later. I actually moved to New York after graduating and became a full-time game artist for indie game studio. So I was a game artist for about 10 years in New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what does that look like to be a game artist? You're designing the graphics? Is that what that's considered?
Yeah, so indie game studio is so small, you have to kind of wear multiple hats, that's what we call it. So I did anything from interface design to character design, animating the interface, characters. I also get to be in a team with the game designers and producers and engineers and figure out like how the game should be. So I was doing a little bit of mechanic planning with them and then also producing a little bit because there was no producer for a little bit. So it's not just art discipline, but like I got to learn how to talk to non-artists and how to convey things from their perspective, not just through visually. So I think my communication skill kind of became better that way. So yeah, but lots of hats. Yeah. And I was doing everything in Photoshop and Flash, what else? Unity, that kind of tools was another thing that I got to learn. So that was an awesome experience.
Yeah, it sounds like you got to like touch so many different branches with that and really experience it. That's pretty cool. But just go back for a second. When you said that you studied children's illustration, what does that mean? What does that look like? Is it a matter of taking picture books and like, see what they did here, see what they did here, or like, here's the text, figure out what you would illustrate? Like, how does that translate?
So yes, in our course, I think we got to study the history of children's book illustration for a little bit. So just looking back at all of them, studying them, and then another course was all about making children's books from scratch. So, learning that you have to fit a story in 32 pages, and how does the page turn work, how to communicate the scene more visually telling them by words, that kind of stuff. I got to learn under Professor Alan Drummond, who is a very successful illustrator, picture book illustrator, author, I think. So yeah, that was an awesome experience too. And I got to make a book at the end, and I think Professor even took it to Bologna. I hope I'm saying this right. No. Bologna Art Festival illustration, like the big one. So that was awesome. I don't know what came out of it. Nothing really, I don't know, but I think I represented SCAD. That's where I went for college. So SCAD illustration department for a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah, and I also had, during junior year of college, I went to Italy for another, illustration, a children's book illustration competition. That was drawing 6-panel spread based off of the theme Beyond the Mirror. So that was another opportunity that was awesome.
Yeah, wow. It's so interesting. It's like, oh, this is how it works. Like, wow. That's pretty cool to go to Italy. It's actually kind of funny because it seems like most people go to Italy for classic studies. We have to study the ancient sculptures and things like that. And you went for children's book illustration. But maybe that's the point. Art throughout the centuries, maybe.
Yeah, that part's a little bit complicated. I mean, I didn't go there to study. It was more to receive the award because I was an honorable mention for this competition. So I didn't really go there to study. It's more to celebrate and meet other illustrators, up-and-coming illustrators.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great. And then when you were working as a game artist, were you still trying to work the children's illustration, sort of a side hustle thing, or you had put it aside while you were sort of working on that career?
Yes, so my goal was always to become a children's book illustrator. Although I found passion and love for game art, I still do concept art and some asset creation. In fact, I just finished achievement icons for this game, the Wild at Heart. It's available on Unity and I think Xbox too. It's but done by a beautiful game studio, and the game is so beautiful. So I love it.
Wow.
I don't want to say I'm not. I'm as passionate about game art and game artists as much as children's book. But yes, to answer your question, my art director was fortunate enough to let me work on the book dummy, because we always had one-on-ones, which is like a weekly meeting with an art director just to check in and make sure like I'm doing all right. And one of the parts that wasn't fulfilling was to not being able to create book dummies. So he actually worked with me and went through this whole process and be like, okay, do the sketches by next week or blah, blah. So we actually created a book dummy. And that actually helped me because I have several book dummies to show my agent. And I also went to conferences like 3x3 Magazine, which is a popular illustration publication. They used to host conferences in New York. And that's how I met this illustrator, and he introduced me to my current agent.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of all connects. Yeah. And I think that the part that helped me was to stay focused and keep voicing that I want to do this.
Yeah.
And supportive people would just kind of help you to reach that goal. So I was very lucky to be surrounded by many talented, supportive people.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that means you got the agent off of showing them sort of the book dummy that you had made, not through the regular... And as a regular querying process for illustrators, like how do illustrators usually find an agent?
Yeah, I've heard that you have to query and send emails, but again, I think I got super, super lucky in that I talked to the illustrator and he sent me an intro email to my agent, and then, it took another year of convincing her to meet me.
Wow.
And I kept sending, new illustrations, be like, hey, just sticking in, I have this new illustration, or I have like more ideas, book dummies. But yeah, I kind of went the other route, like unusual route, which, yeah, I feel incredibly lucky to do that.
Yeah. And then you said that you're sending her illustrations. So what does that mean? You just sort of create a character and then just send it over? Or what is that? Because... Yeah. Well, as a writer, I know I write a story and then I send it. If the story resonates or the style of writing resonates, they'll show interest. So does that translate to illustration, or is that something that's totally different? Because I'm thinking in words, not in pictures. So that's why I'm curious. Like, hey, I just made this drawing. Look at it. I don't like. What does that look like?
Yeah, I was very strategic about it because I was looking at my portfolio and I was talking to the illustrator who has made books, and ask them for feedback, and they would say, oh, you don't have this in your portfolio, why don't you try this, or why don't you try to actually do a layout design of this page, and then would send that to my agent and say, hey, I just tried this thing, I know it wasn't in my portfolio, just stick it out, see if you like it, and sometimes I'll just do a booklet or something, a postcard, just so she would be interested in me. But yeah, I wasn't just drawing random things that I like. It's more of like, okay, what's missing in my portfolio that would convince her to let me join her team. Again, the peers are so helpful.
What does it mean that something's missing? Is it a certain kind of a look or a character, or what? Mm-hmm. My portfolio needs something else. Like, how do you approach that even?
So yeah, as a game artist, I had lots of character designs. One, I would do, for example, one dragon in different styles, because as an indie game studio, you have to kind of cater to what the client wants and not necessarily like push your style onto them. But I was really good at style change, but then what was missing, for example, was like consistent style in my portfolio, and then being able to create, like, kids was missing from my portfolio, a lot of sceneries were missing, some black and white. Yeah, that kind of stuff. I think it's kind of like a children's book illustrators would be like, oh yeah, why don't you have that? It's silly. But again, I came from a game artist background, and I think my portfolio was catered towards that genre, and I think I tailored it so it fits the children's book illustration market, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's almost like you needed the range to show that you could fit into different types of children's stories almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like usable art, basically.
Right. When they're in contact with you about illustrating someone's book, or they're looking into you, they're looking at your characters, but not because they want to take those characters. They're looking at your characters just to see your style and to see your range. Or, how does that work? If someone's going to be like, oh, I want Shiho to illustrate for me. Is it, oh, I love her style, but apply your style to my story? Is that kind of what it is?
I'm working on my third book, and each experience has been different.
Okay.
My first book, Two Pirates Plus One Robot, I had to do about 3 rounds of character design before I was signed on, just because I think my portfolio, again, was kind of scattered, right. And they wanted to make sure I can do a book with one style. So I kind of gave them a range, and they were like, oh, this is too adult or too game realistic, like, don't do that. So I honed that down to fit, again, the children's book market. So I learned so much from that book. And then the book that I worked on this year was Scholastic Periodic Table, which comes out in October 5th.
Yay.
This one's a little bit, yay,
yeah.
Was a different experience because they wanted me to do characters, but they were also interested in me trying out different lettering and typography.
Oh.
So I had to do a spread or two just exploring based on the text they gave me, and I tried it, and they actually liked the type as much as the characters. I think they were actually confident in me creating characters. They just wanted to make sure the other surrounding parts was good, and I got to do a lot of lettering and typography. I learned a lot from this book as well. And then another book I'm working on right now with Simon & Schuster, they were confident in my style and everything, so they were like, just do sketches for this book, here's the manuscript. And they were like, okay, cool, like, we love the sketches. You know, there's some tweaks on the layouts, but keep going. So kind of pretty hands-off and trusting in that part, which is awesome. So yeah, very different experiences.
Wow. Well, I guess eventually you'll have so many books to be your portfolio instead of having to create new stuff. Like, look at my library. This is what I can do.
Yeah, hopefully. I think that's how it should be. I think I'm a little bit slower than other artists. Like, some artists know and, you know, is defined by their style, and, like, they're so amazing. But I think I'm at a good point now. But, yeah, I'm so thankful for those book opportunities and, like, gave me a chance. So I'm more figured out now.
That's great. And then when they send you the book, like, okay, we want you to illustrate the book, they send you the text, and then where do you go from there? Because I guess you'll know how many your pages or your space for illustration, but you can just do anything you want per page, or do they have some sort of direction of we want to see a lot of X, or how does that happen?
Yeah, usually it has the page numbers on the manuscript that I get. Okay. So I can see the pacing, but I'm okay to kind of move things around if I wanted to. I haven't personally had to do that because the flow was nice. There was some art notes. There's like varying degrees of art notes between the books. Some of them are very particular. Some of them are like suggestions. So I try to incorporate them as much as possible. But I also have my own endings and try to think of an example. Like the periodic table book, it's a nonfiction, very educational book, so it was mostly information about that particular element, and I have to come up with personalities and the quirks of each character to make sure it's fun for kids.
Wow.
And I had no like art directions for that. I think I made it okay. They loved it, and they were like, "Oh, this is so funny that you did this," and they kind of went with that and added on. Like the text kind of supported that back, which is nice as well. So, yeah.
Amazing.
That answers the question.
Yeah. Are you in contact with the author as you're working, or it's two totally separate things that are going on?
Yeah, the first 2 books, I didn't talk to them until, like, Henry Hurt, which is the author for Two Pirates Plus One Robot. We didn't really talk until the book was done, but then he would forward his comments to the editor, and then I'll receive it. And after the book is done, like, we started talking, and I actually went to his WonderCon panel, which was awesome. Yeah, but I think the 3rd book, I'm trying to communicate more with the author.
Well, I don't know if there's any rules for this, or if you even have an answer for this, but how much do you have to listen to them as far as, I really want it to look like this versus this is the general look I'm going for, and then just see what you could do with it, right? Because with cover design, a lot of times they don't let the authors go too close to that because all the authors have these like vision in their head, but because they're not artists, they don't really get it. So I don't know if you sort of had that experience or not, where it's like, you hired me because you like what I'm doing, so you kind of trust me to do the work, or if it's so far talking to the author has been a good thing.
So I don't think I had experience with like authors or felt like authors telling me what to do yet. Again, I mainly talk to the art directors and designers and editors, and I think the benefit is that they filter, I don't know if it's filtered out, but they gave me feedback, and the art notes is kind of clear and direct enough that I can do my illustrations. And of course, like the editor would show that back to like every stage, like even sketches, they'll show that to the author and get her input. They're never like, I want this look to be this way. It's more of like, oh, this happens here and it's not written, but this should be happening in the background kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, so visually they don't really say this is what should be drawn. It's just more to enhance the story, that kind of art note.
Right, well, because the visuals are, they have to tell the story without like repeating the story almost. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it's just like a picture book is all about like telling visually more than with words. So there might be a secondary arc that's not told through the text, and by art notes I get those stories, and I'm like, oh, this is how this flow goes, and I try to illustrate that and incorporate within the illustrations as much as possible, and hopefully the kids will get that kind of different relationship or different situations or that kind of stuff.
And then generally we're talking, I guess picture books are usually within 30-something pages-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So how long does that take you to work on a project? It could be a ballpark range, I guess it will depend on the project, but is that about a year that it takes you to work on it, or is it a few months, or a few days?
I wish it was a few days. Yeah, I think it's like 6 months to a year.
Wow.
Is what's this, The periodic table is a little bit different because I have to, I mean, it's not a picture book, it's a juvenile nonfiction is the genre. So that I have to illustrate all 118 elements and like do those pages. So the pages of the book is pretty thick. But how long did it take? That was like, it's still less than a year, I think.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was just going max speed with that. But again, I was enjoying it so much that the hours didn't really bother me.
Yeah.
But wait, maybe I'm a workaholic. I don't know.
That's good. For you personally, when you're working, are you drawing something by hand on actual art stuff and on paper and then transferring it digitally, or do you work digitally with your art stuff?
So I try to sketch everything in pencil and paper first. And then when I'm ready to, I do thumbnail sketches, real sketches, color palettes and all that stuff traditionally. Well, maybe color palettes I'll keep tweaking digitally. Then I will try to refine the sketches digitally, and I do coloring digitally, but I do the character shapes and some of the textures with brush and ink and pencil. So that's why I hope my illustration kind of looks like it has a traditional medium touch, but it's mixed. I go back and forth, but the initial sketches, I definitely do it more on paper because I want the flow to be right and I can move faster that way.
I guess it makes sense that something black and white will transfer over also digitally pretty well versus colors probably. I guess it does get thrown off a little bit in the digital. The color won't be exactly the same, or?
Yeah, the color sketches are more to get the color scheme right and color palettes right, and then I'll fine tune it digitally, but I'll do those like really mini thumbnail color sketches, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, just this is a total side thing, but I've seen there's a lot of illustrators on Instagram. Does it seem to be like an illustrator medium to be on Instagram?
I think so. Now that I'm part of like SCDWI and learned a lot, I know writers and authors tend to be on Twitter.
Yeah. But
illustrators are more communicative, visually through Instagram. And there's a lot of agents and editors that are looking at Instagram for new artists. So yeah, I think that's the way currently. I think I've heard TikTok is a new thing too.
Yeah.
For illustrators that are like more communicative and like love to talk about the process and tips and tricks and stuff. But I'm an introvert, so I haven't ventured out to that yet.
Yeah. Well, you'll put up sketches or artwork sometimes for different theme days or whatever it is. Is that stuff that you're just kind of, quote unquote, like you're just throwing it together? You just did a quick sketch and putting it up there just to keep the account going, or is this stuff that you're digging up to put up there? Or
So I try to be aware of themes and what's coming up next month. I even have a calendar that has what is celebrated that day. Like, we had the National Donut Day recently,
Yeah.
and there's a calendar for that. So I keep that in mind. But I try not to get too caught up with it because Childhood Week is coming up, and that's a big thing for some of the illustrators. And if you use that hashtag or mermaid in May, you get more viewers and you get to interact. But again, if I'm not personally passionate about it, or like I don't do it to gain followers, and I just do it because I want to be part of the community and what it is, and hopefully I get to interact with a few maybe more full followers and get 1,000 followers instantly. So. Yeah. That's why I do it. And it's fun to be part of the community. Like, there's illustrators I love to follow on Instagram, and if they're doing something fun, yeah, I'll try to join. It's more for interaction.
Well, also, every day is another international day, so we have to prioritize. Like, Donut Day is definitely one we all have to be celebrating. Other random days, maybe not necessarily. Well, cool, awesome. So we'll wrap up now with our fill in the blank question. So we have the fill in the blank of, I love it when authors, I guess you could say illustrators, editors, books, etc., whatever you want to put in there, do X, and I really don't like it when they do X. So how would you fill in the blank for that?
So I think I'll choose books. I love when books lean in and expand my world and my daughter's world because we love reading together.
Amazing.
And we don't like it when the book teaches or tries to teach a lesson. We immediately shut the book and be like, okay, next one. So yeah. Like
in a preachy kind of way, because a lot of kids' books do have the lessons in it. Or maybe not, or what do you mean?
Mm-hmm. Obvious lessons.
Yeah, okay.
Let's do this to be nice people. We're not really interested in that.
Yeah, we want an adventure or whatever. Yeah.
But I do love books and The Rabbit Listened.
Yes, I have it.
That's not preachy at all, but it teaches us a lesson, but it's not about the lesson. But I love that book. So there's ways to teach a lesson, quote, quote, but without being preachy.
Yeah, okay, I hear that. Yeah, that's a good book. Very good. Okay, well, Shiho, thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's such a treat to have you as our guest.
Thank you so much for inviting me again. It was so much fun. I felt like it went by so fast.
This was a bonus episode of Oh My Word podcast featuring illustrator Shiho Pate. To find out more about Shiho and her work, please visit the link in the episode notes. To find out more about Oh My Word podcast and all the great stuff we're up to, please follow us on Instagram at Oh My Word podcast. Check us out at eltenenbaum.com. Thanks so much for joining us. Catch you next time.